To take another call from Mojo Mathers, if she wishes one. Mr. Mojo Mathers.
I wish to speak to clarify the intent of my SOP 355, which is the one that will delete the new sections that have been inserted around economic impact and practicality. Now, there seems to be a misunderstanding that this SOP will mean that the Animal Welfare Committee can no longer consider these factors. That is not the case. They are already allowed to consider other factors, including economic impact and practicality. What we were concerned about is that this bill now elevates them explicit factors to be considered, that may be considered, and our concern around that is that these factors are precisely the ones that have been used historically in the past to justify codes of welfare that allow extremely cruel practices such as keeping hens confined in factory cages and style quotes and borrowing quotes. And therefore, given that past history of how economic impact and practicality had been abused in the past, we are very concerned that by elevating them explicitly in the bill, we send the wrong message about what kind of factors are important when setting codes of welfare, when setting regulation. So that is not that they cannot be considered, they can be considered, they already are considered, but we don't think these factors in particular justify explicit elevation in the bill. That is what this SOP aims to do, is just to remove the elevation of these factors. It doesn't remove them altogether as factors that can be considered. So I just wanted to clarify that in light of the comment that was made by New Zealand and Labour in particular. So it's not about removing these factors as factors that can be considered altogether. It's about stopping them from being elevated, because we think that that is one of the, given the past history, not desirable in this bill. And also, I wanted to also respond to the comment that was made by the Minister around us being, having been assessed for regulations as being world leaders first in the world. That doesn't apply, in fact, to many practices. In particular, it does not apply to practices such as battery cages and colony cages. Okay. Overseas, countries have gone a very different direction, and many countries are far more progressive around animal welfare than New Zealand is. For example, a European Union directive has set a phase-out date of battery cages from 2012, which is nearly a decade ahead of our phase-out date of 2022. And in Austria, Germany and Switzerland, they have set phase-out dates for colony cages now. So at the time that we are bringing in colony cages, they are going to be phasing them out. That is how far behind we are in terms of our factory farming of animals. And the area of factory farming is something that is still, unfortunately, a really significant issue that this bill does not really come to terms with. It's fantastic that the bill is going to have more enforceable regulation, but the real test will be if MPI actually use the new powers that they have under this bill to take cases to prosecution. In the press just the other week, they did an inquiry into the number of prosecutions that were happening on Canterbury farms in particular, where literally thousands of animals have been found to be mistreated or neglected, and absolutely shocking cases of abuse, and hardly any of them were taken to prosecution. And some of these examples are absolutely appalling, like a video of 4 boys, absolutely video shearing a sheep that was left with bloody legs. I mean, that should have been prosecuted. Instead, they ended up with verbal advice being given to them by MPI. I don't consider that acceptable. The public does not consider that acceptable. We expect more from MPI. We expect them to take cases like that to prosecution, and we hope that this, when the regulations become more enforceable, that they will be given the tools to be able to prosecute clear cases of animal cruelty on farms, because there are far too many and they need to be followed through. Finally, I want... Okay, I'll stop there now. So the final bit that I wanted to talk to was SOP 367, which is the one around suitable alternatives, and I'm hoping that Labour and New Zealand First will support this one. What this one does is require animal ethics committees that if they don't know of a suitable alternative to a particular animal test that complies, then they may not approve the trial on animal tests. And they may only approve it if it complies with the restrictions on the use of animals in research and testing or teaching, and it complies with any conditions issued by the committee. And this, in this SOP, suitable alternative means an equivalent project that does not involve the use of an animal. Now, it's really interesting because MPI officers took this particular SOP out for feedback from research companies and people actually doing research on animals, and some of them came back with the sort of sense that the sky was going to fall in if they weren't allowed to continue doing all the animal tests that they currently do. And it was really hinged around their interpretation of what a suitable alternative meant, because they were saying, well, we're required to do some particular animal test by such a regulation. The reality is, if you're required to test a particular product by regulation on an animal, then there is no suitable alternative that doesn't use animals, because you're required to. It may be that the regulation should be updated, but this would not affect those kinds of requirements, because for the purpose of this, a suitable alternative means one that meets the purposes of what you're aiming to test for, and if you're required to do that by regulation, this SOP would not affect that. Then nearly all of the complaints were concerns that were raised by animal testing organisations were around that. And it is also really important to realise that there is a vested interest by the companies in continuing to use animals in their research, because their reputation has been built around that. That is where they've acquired their skill set, that's where they've invested in the research facility, and they actually haven't invested in the alternatives that need to be brought in from overseas expertise, and we need to build up that expertise here, and we need to do, and this SOP will help drive innovation in New Zealand in the direction that we want to go as a country, one that does not rely on the testing, use of animals in testing subjects. This is some of the most cruel, barbaric and awful exploitation of animals that goes on in some of these testing research facilities, and we should be doing everything we can to ensure that only the most appropriate tests that go through, and that everything else is replaced wherever possible. So that's what this SOP is around. Thank you very much.
Call Todd Barclay.
Here, I move that the question now be put.
Question. I call Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. I only intend to make a relatively brief contribution to this debate, and in reply to Mojo Mathers, who has asked